If you're watching this prison documentary right now, hit subscribe, because what follows is one of the harshest confessions ever made inside a U.S. high-security prison. The morning everything started, cell block E felt colder than usual. The blue-toned light sliding through the barred windows looked thin and metallic, and every sound, the echo of boots, the clank of steel, carried a tension that inmates recognized instantly. Something had shifted overnight, and the block felt like it was holding its breath. At 6:41 a.m., Officer Bennett began routine count. He was experienced, steady, and not easily rattled. But when he paused at cell E14 he felt something off. The air around the door felt still, as if the space behind it had been emptied of life. He knocked. E14. Count time. No answer. He tried again louder. Still nothing. A tattooed inmate in the next cell, Riker, spiderweb ink on his neck and faded patterns across his arms, leaned toward the bars. Told you something cracked in there last night? Bennett ignored him, inserted the key and opened the door. The cell was empty. Not chaotic. Not disturbed. Everything was perfectly arranged. Bed tight, sheets smooth, property box closed, nothing out of place. Just empty. Impossibly empty for a high-security facility where doors never opened without alarms. Control, Bennett radioed, pulse tightening. We have a missing inmate. Immediate lockdown. The steel bars of cell block E slammed shut within seconds. Red lights flashed. Doors froze. Inmates pressed their tattooed arms through the bars, whispering, cursing, trading theories. No way he escaped. Somebody covered something up. Cameras had to catch it. But the cameras didn't. Surveillance footage from the previous night showed the block dark and calm. At 12:04 a.m., camera 7 flickered with half a second of static. At 12:06 a.m., a blurred figure moved quickly past E14, too fast to identify. At 12:08 a.m., another burst of static hit the screen. But the inmate was never shown leaving the cell. No door opened. No silhouette appeared. No alarm triggered. For investigators, that was the impossible part. By mid-morning, the entire prison buzzed with rumors. Some said the inmate escaped. Others whispered that something inside the facility swallowed him. But one man, Dax Stonehand Mercer, the missing inmate's former cellmate, remained silent. Dax was a lifer with full black ink sleeves and calm eyes that rarely revealed emotion. When officers escorted him to the interview room, his chains rattled lightly, but his expression barely shifted. Officer Hale questioned him. You were the last person to see him. Did he say anything unusual? Dax nodded once. He said something was coming. What does that mean? He didn't explain. But he looked scared. He was asking questions he shouldn't have, about guard rotations, cameras, lockdown drills. Escape questions? Hale pressed. No, Dax said quietly. He wasn't planning to run. He was planning to talk. To who? He never told me. But he said he'd made a mistake and it was too late to take it back. Before Hale could continue, the radio crackled. Investigations, report to the lower utility corridor. We found something. Hale left the room immediately. The utility corridor beneath cell block E was narrow, dim, and lined with pipes. The air carried the metallic smell of dust and machinery. A maintenance officer pointed to a panel someone had unscrewed. Behind it was a scrap of fabric from a prison-issue shirt and a thin smear of dark soot. Not blood, just residue, as if someone had crawled through a tight, unlit space. Another officer shouted from farther down the corridor. Sir, over here. Hale followed the voice and stopped. On the wall, written in rough strokes of burned insulation, were the words, "The camera doesn't show everything. Fresh. Still flaking." Hale called for a forensic sweep, but before the team arrived he noticed something else beneath the pipes. A boot print. Fresh. And pointing deeper into the darkness. Above them, cell block E erupted with noise again. Inmates slammed fists against bars, tattoos shifting across their skin like moving shadows. Some shouted theories. Some demanded answers. But Dax stood motionless at his cell door, watching the commotion with unsettling calm. Bennett approached him later. You still think he didn't run? Dax didn't blink. He didn't run. He disappeared because he knew something he shouldn't have. What did he know? Dax finally looked at Bennett, eyes cold. He said there were things happening in this prison that weren't on paper. Things the cameras don't show. Things buried in the walls. Bennett felt a chill crawl across his spine. Because deep down he knew Dax wasn't lying. And whatever happened to the missing inmate, it wasn't over. Moments later, the surveillance office called in a final update. They found 10 seconds of corrupted footage from the exact minute the inmate vanished. 10 seconds of pure black. As if something, or someone, stood directly between the inmate and the camera, blocking the view, blocking the truth, and leaving nothing behind but a message in the dark. The morning light seeping through Iron Creek's narrow windows had a cold, blue-gray tint, making the prison feel suspended in tension. Breakfast trays clattered lightly, inmates moved slowly, tattoos visible under orange uniforms, and guards' boots echoed differently against concrete. The silence was heavy, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Lieutenant Marcus Hale moved through E-Wing with 2 officers behind him, scanning the corridor. Every inmate watched, every tattooed arm shifting as eyes followed his movements. Rumors spread faster than official reports. Everyone knew something was wrong. Tyrone Briggs, the inmate who collapsed during the early morning incident, had been moved to medical. Hale didn't believe a simple feint explained what happened. Subtle vent marks and a hidden scrap of cloth suggested planning. The cell's small dimensions amplified tension. The vent screws were scratched, almost intentionally, and Hale noted the faint smell of cold metal. "Sir," Officer Delgado said, handing over a tablet. He rewound footage to 2:11 a.m. A shadow moved near the hallway corner outside E-Wing. A tattooed forearm in an orange sleeve, then retreat into darkness. Hale studied it. "Who is that?" Delgado shook his head. "Could be one of 6 guys. 6 possibilities, all connected to prison politics, all dangerous. Cell switching, vent tampering, surveillance shadows, a collapsing inmate. It was never isolated." Hale's instincts said it was a planned operation. Axel Moreno, heavily tattooed, was brought in. Hale asked what he knew. Moreno said Briggs had been warned, that someone approached him about cameras, someone not in the inmate population. Briggs hadn't listened. "He didn't say their name," Moreno said, "but he knew something was wrong." Upstairs, surveillance analysts discovered a manual override log for camera 7, 10 minutes before Briggs disappeared. Unauthorized access. A shadow patrolling the hallway during the blackout appeared on camera 9, broad and deliberate, moving unhurriedly. Someone inside the prison had created blind spots. Internal officer interviews added complications. Officer Larson, nervous, admitted seeing someone claiming to be from State Facilities Technical Support, near E-Block. He hadn't logged it. The uniform looked official. The timing aligned perfectly with the blackout. Someone impersonated a technician to manipulate access. Inmate testimonies added details. Cortez, tattooed arms visible, reported Briggs asking questions about sealed vents on the lower level, hearing tapping, signaling. The investigation shifted. This wasn't a simple missing inmate. This was coordinated infiltration. Someone was moving pieces strategically. Hale convened with the warden. "Are we dealing with a riot setup?" Warden Collings asked. "No," Hale replied. "Smarter. Someone is preparing for something targeted. A breakout is possible, but motives and methods remain unclear." Later, Hale inspected E12 again. Hidden beneath the mattress, he found 3 words etched into the metal bed frame: "Don't trust them." Fresh. Intentional. A warning left for investigators. Surveillance logs, vent tampering, manual overrides, and microchip fragments confirmed it. Someone inside or outside the prison was supplying inmates with technology, orchestrating movements and testing the system. Hale felt the realization settle. This wasn't random. This wasn't a minor disruption. The operation had already begun. Whoever orchestrated it understood the prison, the schedules, and the blind spots better than anyone on staff. The next move wouldn't be an inmate collapsing. It would be calculated. The walls of Iron Creek were hiding something. And Hale knew the facility wasn't ready. By the time night fell over Cell Block E, the tension inside Iron Creek had reached a level even veteran officers felt in their bones. The blue-toned overhead lights reflected coldly off the steel bars, casting long harsh shadows across the concrete floors. Inmates, all in bright orange uniforms, moved slowly, their tattoos dark and shifting with each flexed muscle. They whispered through the bars, eyes flicking toward every corner, every shadow, every step of a passing guard. Everyone felt it, the sense that someone was watching, planning, calculating. Lieutenant Hale made his rounds with Officer Bennett at his side. The corridor was eerily silent except for the faint metallic echo of boots. They paused outside E12, the cell that had become the epicenter of suspicion. Hale crouched to examine the vent again, now reinforced with temporary locks after the last investigation. A faint scratch mark remained, almost invisible in the blue-toned light. He traced it with a gloved finger. Someone had been there after the last sweep, and whoever it was had moved carefully, deliberately. Upstairs, surveillance analysts were monitoring the cameras obsessively. Monroe's eyes were glued to the monitors. "Look at this," she whispered, zooming in on the lower hallway. A shadow moved slowly near the blind spot at 12:06 a.m., then paused, looking toward the camera. It was too broad for a normal inmate. Too deliberate. Hale joined her side, jaw tight. Someone's inside the corridor and they're not hiding. They want to be here, they want to see. The tension escalated further when Officer Larson was called back in for questioning. He fidgeted under Hale's watchful gaze, orange uniform slightly rumpled from earlier shifts. I told you everything," he stammered. Hale leaned in. "Not everything. Who did you see near the blind spot last night?" Larson swallowed. I only saw the shadow. Someone tall, moving calmly. They weren't an inmate, not exactly." Hale nodded slowly. "And did they leave anything behind?" Larson's eyes flicked to the floor. "A microchip. It fell when they were climbing the vent." Hale felt a chill. Not inmate made. Not normal. Someone was arming the operation with tools far beyond what anyone expected. By midnight, the corridors were restless. Inmates in orange shifted in their cells, whispering, some banging lightly on bars and subtle signals. Tattooed arms flexed as they leaned forward, eyes scanning. Hale and Bennett observed from the stairwell, seeing a pattern emerge. Some were intentionally drawing attention while others slipped past unnoticed. This was no ordinary night. Someone inside was orchestrating movements, and every action had a purpose. A sudden commotion erupted near the laundry corridor. Tattooed inmate Cortez was shouting to another cellmate, pointing at a loose vent cover. "They're moving. They're trying to set it up now." Hale sprinted toward the scene with Bennett. The vent cover was slightly ajar, and the faint smell of electrical wiring burned in the air. Someone had attempted to access the utility shafts to move unseen through the prison. The microchip fragments were proof. Technology had already been deployed. Hale pulled back to assess. The lockdown alarms hadn't tripped, the cameras had missed the entire maneuver, and yet everything pointed to one conclusion: the operation was live. Someone inside had orchestrated not just surveillance tampering but the first active movement of whatever plan was unfolding. He called a rapid meeting with the warden and senior staff in the surveillance room. Blue-tinted monitors reflected in everyone's eyes as Hale outlined the events. Vent tampering, shadowy figures in blind spots, microchip evidence, and the whispered warnings from inmates. Warden Collings looked grim. "You're saying someone is moving through this prison undetected?" Hale nodded. "And they're testing response times, using inmates and staff unknowingly as part of the plan." Meanwhile, inside the block, Dax Mercer observed quietly from a corner cell. His arms were crossed, tattoos dark under the blue lighting, eyes fixed on Briggs, who had been moved back to E12 after medical clearance. Dax whispered to another inmate, "They're not done. This is just the start." His calm tone belied the magnitude of what was unfolding. The following morning, investigators discovered a pattern of subtle, unauthorized cell swaps. Briggs had not been the only one moved without proper logs. Inmates in orange uniforms, heavily tattooed, had been relocated during the night. The purpose was unclear, but the timing coincided perfectly with camera disruptions and vent access. Someone was learning the routines of guards, the blind spots of cameras, and the vulnerabilities of the inmates themselves. Hale revisited the control room. If someone inside this prison knows exactly how to manipulate movement, they could be planning a breakout or worse, he muttered. Surveillance footage confirmed it. Shadows moved deliberately in unmonitored corridors, microchip fragments lay in strategic locations, and vents showed signs of repeated access. Every discovery indicated escalating sophistication. Then came the breakthrough. Officer Bennett noticed a faint trail of smudged dust on the utility floor. Hale leaned over, examining it under the blue-tinted lights. The marks were consistent with someone crawling through vents or tight spaces. The smudges led directly toward the back of E-Wing, stopping abruptly at a maintenance hatch. Hale froze. Someone had mapped the block in detail, moving unseen and leaving minimal traces. The operation wasn't random. It was precise. As night deepened, the tension inside the prison reached its peak. Inmates whispered warnings and questions across bars, tattoos glinting under the overhead blue lights. Guards doubled shifts, moving in coordinated patterns, but the unknown orchestrator always seemed one step ahead. Hale watched from the stairwell, realizing that the next move wouldn't be visible. It would hit where the prison felt most secure. Inside blind spots, inside vents, inside the carefully calculated movements of inmates and technology. Dax Mercer leaned back in his cell, quiet, observing. Tattooed arms resting on the bars, he noticed Briggs shifting nervously, realizing that whatever plan had started in E12 was escalating. Someone, inside or outside, had taken control of Iron Creek without entering it openly. Every failed observation, every manipulated camera, every microchip fragment told the same story. The operation was alive, growing, and approaching a point of danger far greater than anyone inside the prison realized. By the early hours of the next day, investigators reviewed the footage again. Camera angles revealed only faint shadows and blurred movements, but the patterns were undeniable. Someone had infiltrated the system, controlled it, and left subtle warnings for those paying attention. Hale knew it would only be a matter of time before the first calculated action struck. The walls of Iron Creek held secrets, but tonight, those secrets were preparing to reveal themselves. The morning after the latest incidents, the corridors of Iron Creek were unusually still. The blue-tinted lights cast a cold wash across the concrete floors, reflecting off steel bars and surveillance cameras, their lenses now scrubbed and checked repeatedly. Inmates in orange uniforms paced slowly behind bars, tattoos visible along forearms and necks, whispering to each other in low tones. Something had changed overnight. Everyone could feel it. The air was heavier, charged with an unspoken tension that even the guards seemed unable to shake. Lieutenant Hale and Officer Bennett convened a hasty meeting in the surveillance room. Multiple monitors flickered with footage from the night before, showing shadows, faint movements, and blurred sequences from blind spots. Hale's eyes scanned the screens, analyzing patterns that previous investigations had missed. "Someone is orchestrating this," he muttered, voice low. "Not just moving through the block, studying it, predicting guard rotations, manipulating cameras. This isn't random." Monroe, the surveillance analyst, pointed to a faint anomaly on camera 5. "Look here. At 11:57 p.m., there's a subtle reflection off the vent in E12. It doesn't match any known movement from last night." Hale leaned in. The reflection was brief, almost imperceptible, a shadow that didn't align with any inmate or staff. "That's our entry point," he said. Someone accessed the vent while avoiding cameras. Meanwhile, interviews continued in the gray-walled interrogation rooms. Axel Moreno, tattooed arms crossed, sat quietly as Hale questioned him. Moreno's calm demeanor was unnerving, but his information was precise. "They're not just testing guards," he said. "They're testing trust. Who notices? Who reports? Who gets ignored?" Hale's thoughts drifted to Briggs, recovering in the infirmary. The faint fear in Briggs's eyes mirrored the calculated risk of the orchestrator. "This operation relies on psychology," Hale noted to Bennett. "Manipulating fear, uncertainty, and perception. Every cell swap, every blackout, every microchip left behind, it's all part of a bigger plan." The team then focused on the microchip fragments discovered in the utility corridor. Analysis revealed these were not ordinary electronics. They were part of a system capable of controlling locks and sensors remotely. A controlled experiment had been run to test response times and vulnerabilities. Hale felt the gravity of the situation settle in. Whoever supplied these devices had access, expertise, and a clear understanding of Iron Creek's infrastructure. Further inmate interviews revealed a network of quiet observers. Tattooed inmates in orange uniforms had been communicating using subtle signals, taps on pipes, faint knocks, coded gestures, all to relay messages about guard movements and camera activity. These signals weren't random. They were organized, deliberate, and coordinated with someone outside the known chain of command. Hale realized that the orchestrator had infiltrated both the physical and social architecture of the prison. By afternoon, a breakthrough emerged. A detailed map of E-Wing's vent system and maintenance corridors was found hidden under a loose floor panel in a seldom-used cell. The map included handwritten notes, timing schedules for guard rotations, and subtle annotations about surveillance camera blind spots. This was not inmate improvisation. It was professional, meticulously planned, and tailored specifically to exploit Iron Creek's weaknesses. Hale and Bennett examined the map in the blue-toned control room, the metallic reflection of monitors casting cold light on their faces. "This confirms it," Bennett said. "They're planning something that requires inside coordination and real-time observation." Hale nodded grimly. "And whoever did this isn't improvising. They're several steps ahead." The focus shifted back to the inmates who had observed and reported discreetly. Cortez, with his tattooed arms visible through his orange uniform, revealed subtle details about nightly movements. "They're using the shadows and timing the gaps between patrols," he said. Nobody's supposed to see them, but everyone notices. That's the trick. Hale recognized the psychological precision. The orchestrator's strategy relied on fear, observation, and manipulation, not brute force. Then came another revelation. Officer Larson, still nervous, was cross-checked with surveillance logs. He had unknowingly facilitated part of the plan by allowing brief access to restricted maintenance areas. It wasn't intentional, but it showed how the orchestrator used trust and protocol against the prison system. Every blind spot, every unexplained movement, and every hesitant report had been woven into the operations framework. By evening, Hale reviewed all gathered evidence. The vent tampering, shadowed movements, unauthorized microchips, and coded inmate communications painted a clear picture. Iron Creek's defenses had been breached from within. Not by chaos or gangs, but by a methodical, intelligent hand exploiting both technology and human behavior. The orchestrator had anticipated scrutiny, anticipated responses, and left enough breadcrumbs to mislead investigators while remaining unseen. As Hale walked the blue-lit corridors alone, observing tattooed inmates in orange uniforms behind bars, he understood the full weight of the situation. Every movement, every glance, every whispered signal was a calculated part of a larger plan. The prison walls, which had seemed impregnable, now revealed their hidden vulnerabilities. The night deepened, and the tension became almost tangible. Inmates whispered across cells, tattoos glinting in the blue light. Guards checked and rechecked corridors, but the orchestrator had already adapted. Hale returned to E12, inspecting the vent, the bed frame, and surrounding floor for any overlooked evidence. The scratches, microchips, and hidden maps were all signs of a singular, intelligent strategy. A sudden flicker of the surveillance monitor drew Hale's attention. A shadow passed through a previously cleared hallway, tattooed arms and orange visible briefly, but too fast to identify. Someone was testing, observing, moving. The operation was alive, growing, and nothing within Iron Creek had stopped it. Hale felt the truth sink in. This wasn't a minor breach. This was a carefully controlled, psychological and technological intrusion into the heart of the prison. He exited the corridor and paused in the stairwell. The blue-toned lights reflected across his face, cold and unyielding. He knew one fact with certainty: the orchestrator's plan was unfolding, and Iron Creek had no idea what the next move would be. The truth behind the walls was now fully visible to Hale and his team, but it was more dangerous, calculated, and patient than anyone could have anticipated. And deep in the shadows of E-Wing, the orchestrator waited, observing, calculating, ready to take the next step. Night had fully descended over Iron Creek, casting the corridors in a deep, cold blue. The overhead fluorescent lights reflected harshly on the concrete floors, bouncing off steel bars, illuminating the tattoos of inmates in orange uniforms as they shifted behind their cells. Everyone could sense the tension. Something was about to unfold. Lieutenant Hale moved cautiously through E-Wing with Officers Bennett and Delgado. The air smelled faintly of cold metal, disinfectant, and the lingering tension of past incidents. Every step echoed, every shadow seemed alive, every movement of a tattooed inmate felt calculated. Hale's team had pieced together the events from the past weeks: the vent tampering, microchip fragments, shadowy movements, and coded inmate communications, and now they had enough to act. The control room was a hive of activity. Monitors flickered with live feeds, showing inmates in orange uniforms pacing, whispering, and observing. Hale studied the blue-tinted screens intently. "We know their patterns," he said. "We know who's coordinating. It's time to confront them before the operation escalates further." The focus turned to Dax Mercer, the orchestrator inside the prison. Tattooed arms visible under his orange jumpsuit, he moved with deliberate calm, observing Briggs and other inmates. Mercer had manipulated the environment perfectly. Shadows, blind spots, timed cell swaps, and subtle psychological pressure had all been part of his strategy. He was confident, but tonight Hale intended to disrupt that confidence. Hale and his team approached E12, the epicenter of the initial incident. Mercer was inside, crouched near the vent, inspecting it carefully. The scratches on the metal and the hidden microchip fragments confirmed that this was the heart of the operation. Hale cleared his throat. "Dax Mercer, you're done." Mercer's head lifted slowly, tattoos glinting under the blue light. Calm, almost amused, he said, "Lieutenant, you're a little late, aren't you?" "You've had your chance," Hale replied. "All of this, the tampering, the coded communications, the microchips, it ends tonight." Mercer smirked. "You still don't get it? It wasn't just me. They're all part of it." He gestured subtly, and 2 other tattooed inmates in orange uniforms shifted in nearby cells, acknowledging his command. Hale felt the weight of coordination, the deep web Mercer had woven among the inmate population. Officers Bennett and Delgado moved to secure the hallway and restrict access. Hale advanced carefully, documenting every movement. Mercer continued, "You think taking me stops it? The plan isn't just me. It's the walls, the routines, the trust, your trust. And that can't be contained by bars." Hale ignored the philosophical jab and focused on the tactical objective. "We neutralize the network first, then you. Everyone involved will be accounted for." Suddenly, a faint metallic click echoed from the vent. Mercer smiled. "You'll see. It's already in motion." Hale froze. The team's prior investigations indicated that some vents had been rigged for minor, controlled diversions. It wasn't dangerous per se, but it was enough to create a window for inmate movement if left unchecked. Hale signaled the officers, who immediately checked the vents while he maintained visual on Mercer. Each vent, each blind spot, and each shadow had been anticipated and accounted for. The team worked with precision, reflecting the preparation of weeks of internal investigation. In the control room, Monroe highlighted live feeds showing the coordinated inmate movements. Tattooed inmates in orange uniforms were being guided back to secure cells without incident, indicating Mercer's network was now fully exposed. Every coded gesture, every pipe tap, every subtle signal had been traced. The orchestrated network collapsed under the pressure of precise monitoring and intervention. Hale finally confronted Mercer directly. The orchestrator's calm expression faltered slightly under Hale's scrutiny. Mercer knew he had lost control. Hale leaned close. "Your operation ends now. You've tested the system enough." Mercer's response was measured. "Maybe, but some pieces are still hidden. The walls remember." His words carried an unsettling weight, a subtle warning that even with the network neutralized, traces of his planning remained embedded in Iron Creek's infrastructure. With Mercer secured, investigators documented every piece of evidence: the tampered vents, microchip fragments, maps, and coordinated inmate actions. Each item told the story of an operation that combined psychology, technology, and human behavior. It was the culmination of weeks of surveillance, interrogation, and deduction. By early morning, Iron Creek was calm once again, but the blue-toned halls retained the memory of tension, strategy, and high-stakes deception. Inmates in orange uniforms were back in their cells, tattoos glinting under the dim fluorescent lights. The prison system had survived, but the orchestrator had left one lingering truth: walls can hold secrets, and some operations are more resilient than they appear. Hale walked through the corridors alone, reflecting on the investigation. The prison had revealed its vulnerabilities, the orchestrator had tested them, and the staff had learned the depth of calculated risk and subtle manipulation that could exist within walls that seemed secure. As he reached the stairwell, Hale turned to the camera, a subtle, cinematic gesture for the audience. "If this prison case stunned you, the next one will be even darker. Subscribe so you don't miss it." The blue-tinted lights flickered gently, casting shadows along the walls, as Iron Creek settled into silence once more. But even in calm, the faint echo of strategy and unseen operations remained, a reminder that behind every wall, truth can be hidden, waiting to surface.